Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to tackle a topic I know a lot of you are really interested in and have been asking about homeopathy. You want to get a better understanding of how it all works, the philosophy behind it. So to do that, we're going to be looking at studies in the philosophy of healing by C.M. Boger.
Oh, yeah. Boger's great. He's a really good choice.
Yeah.
Because he was all about understanding the person, not just like saying, here's the remedy. He really wanted to understand like the individual's experience of being ill, which is really what homeopathy is all about.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting to me about this whole system. It's not just about masking symptoms. It's about, um, what is it about?
It's about seeing the body's symptoms as a language. The body's trying to communicate with you.
Hmm.
And it's saying, hey, something's out of balance here. And I think a lot of times in conventional medicine, we try to suppress those symptoms. But in homeopathy, we're trying to understand what the body is trying to tell us.
Okay, so instead of hitting the mute button on like a noisy alarm, we're actually trying to figure out what's causing that alarm to go off in the first place.
Exactly. And that's where this principle of similibus curenter comes in, like cures like,
Okay.
which is the idea that a substance which can cause symptoms in a healthy person
Hmm.
can, in a very, very small dose, actually stimulate the body's own healing response
Yeah.
to those same symptoms when someone's ill.
So it's not like fighting fire with fire, but more
Mm.
like using a tiny spark to kind of reignite the body's own healing flame.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that healing flame is what homeopaths call the vital force or dynamis. It's that energy that animates us, that keeps us functioning. And when it's disturbed, that's when we experience illness.
So if I'm constantly stressed out and I'm, burning the candle at both ends, that can actually make me more vulnerable to getting sick.
Absolutely. Yeah, that stress is disrupting that vital force,
Mm.
making you more susceptible to imbalances.
Oh man, I'm already thinking differently about how I approach my own health. But there's another layer to this too, right? Something about miasms.
Ah, yes, miasms. So think of miasms as
Yeah.
kind of like an inherited predisposition to certain patterns of illness. It's like if you have a family history of, let's say, heart disease, you might be more likely to develop it. Not because you're destined to, but because it's kind of like a weak link in your system.
So even if I try to live a healthy lifestyle, those predispositions could still make me more vulnerable.
It's not about being doomed. It's about understanding those vulnerabilities so you can make informed choices.
Yeah.
And that's where I think homeopathy gets really interesting because it doesn't just address the immediate symptoms. It's looking at those deeper, often inherited patterns at play.
Okay, so we're starting to see this bigger picture of how homeopathy views health and disease. But how does all this translate into actually treating someone? How do you go from these concepts to actually choosing the right remedy?
Well, that's where Boger's expertise comes in. He talks about the importance of understanding the language of disease, paying attention to all the signals the body is sending us, not just the most obvious ones.
So it's not just about asking the patient what hurts, but really observing their demeanor, their posture, their habits.
Exactly. He gives an example. He says, a slouching, unkempt person might need a different remedy than someone who's very meticulously dressed and very organized, like their outward presentation, can often give us clues about what's happening internally.
It's almost like being a detective, right? Looking for these subtle hints and patterns
Yeah.
to understand the whole story. But where do you even begin with all of it? I mean, there must be tons of different symptoms.
There are. And that's why Boger stresses the importance of understanding of the types of symptoms. He places a particular emphasis on mental and emotional symptoms, things like anxieties and fears, mood changes.
So those are even more important than, say, like a headache or a stomach ache.
They can be, because they often point to a deeper disturbance in that vital force. He also talks about dynamic symptoms, so things like your energy levels, your reactions to temperature, sleep patterns, and then, of course, you have the physical symptoms. But those are often seen as kind of the final manifestation of the disease process.
So it's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get to that core of what's really causing the problem, rather than just addressing that outermost layer.
That's a great analogy. And to make things even more interesting, he points out that the prevailing illnesses in a community can also influence prescribing. He calls this the genus epidemicus.
So if there's like a flu going around, the remedies that are most effective might be different than if everybody's dealing with allergies.
Exactly. It's about seeing the individual within the context of their environment.
This is all so fascinating. But I have to admit, it's a lot to take in. So how do homeopaths actually put all this into practice? How do you go from these complex concepts to actually choosing a remedy?
Well, that, my friend, is where the art of prescribing comes in. And that's exactly what we'll be exploring next. So the art of prescribing is where I think Boger really, really shines. He had this incredible ability to see the connections between a patient's unique symptoms and these subtle, subtle nuances of remedies.
So it's really more than just, you know, matching a symptom to a remedy in a book. You need to have this deeper understanding to see the whole picture.
Exactly. And he actually stresses that if you focus too much on one symptom, it can really lead you down the wrong path. And he gives a really good example of this in one of his cases.
Oh, I love a good case study.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So he describes this woman who had been suffering from these debilitating headaches for years. And, many doctors had focused solely on the headaches, prescribed conventional painkillers, but nothing really provided any lasting relief.
Yeah, that's sadly a pretty common experience for a lot of people dealing with chronic conditions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when Boger took her case, he didn't just ask about the headaches. He inquired about her overall health, her emotional state, even her childhood experiences. And what he discovered was that she had this history of anxiety and suppressed anger. And her headaches often worsened during times of stress.
So the headaches were really just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Exactly. So
Okay.
by understanding that bigger picture, he was able to prescribe a remedy that addressed not just the headaches, but also her underlying emotional state.
And did it work?
Remarkably so. Her headaches lessened significantly.
Yeah.
But even more importantly, her overall sense of well-being improved dramatically.
That's what I think is so powerful about this approach. It's not just symptom relief. It's really about restoring balance on a deeper level.
Absolutely. And he provides numerous examples in his book that highlight this principle. So, for example, he describes a case of a 79-year-old bookkeeper who experienced this sudden onset of vertigo, so severe that he actually had to be helped off a streetcar.
Oh, wow, that's scary.
It was. And he also had weakness in his legs, trembling in his right hand, and an irregular pulse. Many doctors might have immediately diagnosed him with an impending stroke.
Yeah, I can see why those are some pretty serious symptoms.
They are. But Boger, as always, looked beyond the most dramatic symptoms. He noticed that the man had redness in his left eye, puffiness under his eyes, and even a wart on his right eyelid.
Details that other people might have missed or overlooked.
Exactly. And he also inquired about other seemingly unrelated symptoms, like nighttime urination and a bad taste in his mouth in the mornings.
Wow, so he was really piecing together all these different clues to
Exactly.
create this whole picture.
Yeah, and that's how he landed on the remedy, Thuja. He prescribed a single dose,
Yeah.
and within 24 hours, the man started showing improvement. He was actually back at work within a few weeks.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I mean, that's a real testament to the idea of finding the right remedy, the one that really matches the individual's unique pattern of symptoms.
Yeah, and Boger was a master at that. He had this deep, deep understanding of remedies and their subtle nuances.
Mm.
So he shares another case of a 40-year-old lumber camp worker who was experiencing weakness, paleness, and fainting spells. And it turned out he was having these large black stools. And an x-ray revealed that he had a sizable ulcer in his stomach.
So pretty clear-cut physical diagnosis.
Yes. But Boger didn't stop there. He dug deeper, uncovering this history of vertigo accompanied by shortness of breath, nausea, and fainting. He noted that the man had throbbing in his right ear, a dry mouth and throat, and even aching in his calves when he walked. The man also mentioned feeling drowsy, sensitive to cold, and having had typhoid twice in the past.
So he was really taking a comprehensive approach here.
He was. He considered everything, because even seemingly unrelated symptoms can be important clues.
So given all that information, what remedy did he end up choosing?
He ended up prescribing Telia trifoliata, which is a remedy not commonly used for ulcers, but for Boger. It was the perfect fit, based on that totality of the man's symptoms.
And it worked.
It did. The man recovered quickly and was soon back to work in the lumber camp.
These cases are so inspiring. They really show how homeopathy can address, even serious complex conditions. What about cases where conventional medicine really struggles to provide answers, like, for instance, cancer?
Yeah, that's an area where homeopathy has often been met with skepticism, and understandably so. But Butter's insights are definitely thought-provoking.
What did he have to say about it?
Well, he had actually observed a number of cases where carefully chosen remedies had led to what seems like unbelievable cancer cures.
So again, he wasn't trying to treat the cancer itself, but rather addressing the whole person and their unique experience of the disease.
Exactly. So, for example, he describes a case of a middle-aged woman who had this aggressive, cancerous ulcer on her lip, accompanied by shooting pains, and a whole host of digestive symptoms. And after careful analysis, He prescribed colibicromicum,
And what was the outcome?
a complete cure. He also mentions remedies like nitric acid and silica as having cured cancer recurrences after surgery. And he highlighted Bellis perennis as being particularly effective for new mammary nodules, appearing years after surgery.
Wow, those are remarkable results.
He even found that certain remedies could offer significant relief from suffering in incurable cases, you know, really improving quality of life considerably.
So it's clear that he approached these cases with the same meticulous attention to detail and deep understanding of both the patient and the remedies, regardless of the diagnosis.
Exactly. And what I find so admirable about Boger's work is that he never presents himself as having all the answers. He's not dogmatic,
Huh.
but rather invites us to approach each case with open minds and a willingness to learn.
That's refreshing, especially in a field like medicine, which can sometimes feel very rigid and authoritarian.
It's true. I think Boger's work is a really good reminder that healing is as much an art as it is a science. It requires not just knowledge, but also intuition, compassion, and this deep respect for the body's innate capacity to heal.
And the courage to really look beyond the surface and embrace complexity, seeking out the remedy that truly resonates with the individual's unique expression of illness.
Beautifully put. Yeah, it seems like we're really starting to grasp the essence of what Boger's trying to convey.
That homeopathy is not just a system of medicine, but a way of seeing, a way of understanding this interconnectedness of our physical,
Yeah.
mental, and emotional selves.
And within that understanding
Yeah.
lies the potential for profound healing.
But I think it's time we maybe shifted gears a bit and thought about how we can actually apply these principles in a practical way.
Yes. Let's bring it all down to earth
Mm.
and see how it might be relevant to our listeners' own lives. Okay, so we've gone really deep into the philosophy, and we've seen how Boger put these principles into action with some really compelling cases. But what does this all mean for someone listening at home right now who's maybe just starting to explore homeopathy? Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that homeopathy really encourages us to shift our whole perspective on health and illness. It's not about attacking symptoms,
Mhm.
but about understanding them as these valuable messengers.
Yeah, which is a pretty radical departure from how most of us usually think about getting sick, right? Like, I know I'm so used to just reaching for the over-the-counter meds at the first sign of a sniffle.
I think many of us are. But, imagine if instead of automatically suppressing that sniffle, you paused and considered what it might be trying to tell you. Maybe you're pushing yourself too hard. Maybe you need more rest. Maybe there's some emotional stress you haven't addressed.
So even without knowing anything about specific remedies, just this approach alone can help you be more in tune with your body.
Exactly. And that awareness is really the foundation of true healing. Now, of course, if you want to actually use homeopathy to address specific health concerns, that's where working with a qualified practitioner becomes essential, because Boger makes it very clear that accurate prescribing is a complex skill that requires deep knowledge and careful observation.
Yeah, it's not something you can just Google and self-prescribe, right?
Definitely not. There are so many nuances to consider. The intensity of the symptoms, the timing, the things that make them better or worse, that overall pattern of the person's experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it takes a lot of training to develop that kind of discernment.
It does. A good homeopath will spend a lot of time really understanding your unique health history, your lifestyle, your emotional tendencies, even your family history. They're really piecing together this detailed picture to find the remedy that most closely matches your individual needs.
So for someone listening who's really intrigued by what they've learned, that next step would be to reach out to a qualified practitioner.
Absolutely. And even if you're not quite ready to go that route, I think Boger's work offers so much valuable insight that you can apply to your life right now.
Like what specifically?
Remember how Boger's emphasized understanding the person who has the disease. Think about that in your own life. Have you ever noticed certain patterns in your own health? Maybe certain types of illnesses you tend to get, or ways you react to stress.
Yeah, actually I have. Like I'm really prone to getting headaches when I'm overworked. And I always get stomach aches when I'm nervous.
See, that's valuable information. By paying attention to those patterns, you start to understand your own unique vulnerabilities and tendencies, and you can start making choices that support your well-being on a much deeper level.
That's so empowering because it really takes you out of that passive patient role
Yeah.
and makes you an active participant in your own health journey. Honestly, this whole deep dive has really changed the way I think about healing.
Yeah, that's what's so amazing about Boger's work. He really opens up this whole new world of possibilities.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to leave our listener with? Any final nuggets of wisdom?
I think the most important thing is to cultivate curiosity. Don't be afraid to question conventional wisdom. Explore different approaches to healing and trust your own intuition.
I love that. And if our listener wants to dive even deeper into Boger's work, where's a good place for them to start?
His book, Studies in the Philosophy of Healing, it's a fantastic resource. It can feel a little dense at times, but it's just full of profound insights that are so worth the effort.
Awesome. And for those who are ready to experience homeopathy firsthand,
Find a qualified practitioner who resonates with you. You know there are many different approaches within homeopathy, so it's important to find someone who feels like a good fit.
well, this has been an incredibly enriching deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that spark of curiosity alive. There's a whole world of healing possibilities waiting to be discovered. Until next time, happy diving.